Ladies and gentlemen, just Pete Range here. Welcome back to the Catholic Citizen, episode 15, where today we're covering President Biden, what's going on down there in Texas, and the absolute fact that God has a plan for everything. Well, friends, welcome back. It's always great to have you week in and week out here at the Catholic Citizen as we take a look at the week's news from a Catholic perspective, from a biased Catholic perspective, my own. But nonetheless, before we jump into this week's news, we got to make sure that we pay the bills here. So please help us out. Go to awakencatholic.org/donate, and please give all that you have, everything in your savings account, to Awaken Catholic. It is just that important. All right, well, maybe not all that you have, but maybe a good portion of what you have to keep these great shows on the air. Secondly, there's a great app that we have here at Awaken Catholic, and we're trying to form community where people will love each other, will respect each other, and have these difficult political conversations in the context of charity, in the context of treating each other with respect. So download the Awaken Catholic app today. Lastly, Casa Bella Cleaning, the cleaning service that I love above everybody else. I almost love Casa Bella more than my wife. No, just kidding. I don't. But Casa Bella Cleaning is the place you need to go to ensure that your home or that your commercial place, your business is clean, especially during COVID-19. Their website, CasaBellaCleaningInfo.com. You can visit them today to invite them into your home for a cup of tea and then maybe some cleaning as well. All right, Casa Bella, we love you. All right, here we go. This week's news. Number one, I don't even believe that this took place. And if this was any other president who had an R next to their name, it would be all across the news. However, President Biden in a CNN town hall forum just this past week was talking about, or was asked about, the Uyghurs and the fact that they have been oppressed. They're being sterilized, forced abortions. They're being forced into work. We're talking maybe 1 million individuals in Northwest China who are mostly of the Islamic faith, who some people are calling it genocide, which is taking place against this particular minority in Northwest China. Now, when he was asked, why don't you speak out against this? Why don't you say anything about it? He mentioned something of the nature that culturally, this is quote from President Biden, quote, culturally, there are different norms that each country and their leaders are expected to follow. So the Uyghurs, instead of denouncing the genocide against them, President Biden said that this is just part of the cultural norms of China. Are you kidding me? I mean, folks, some people complain about the different trade wars and stuff that President Trump started with China. But good thing about President Trump, he wasn't afraid to kind of speak the truth and speak out against some of these issues. But why is President Biden afraid to call out China on their oppression of the Uyghurs there, where they're forcing sterilization? The BBC has been covering this. This isn't crazy right-wing networks that are covering this. The BBC has been all over this. People who've escaped these internment camps are crying out to the world for help. And President Biden, the leader of the free world, in his opportunity to speak out against this oppression happened against the Uyghurs, what does he say? It's the cultural norms of the country of China. Unbelievable. All right, secondly, one other thing we've been covering about President Biden, and some of the immigration things that he's done, as a Catholic, I think those are some good things, okay? So I'm not going to be one who's just going to fight everything that he does. I mean, that there's areas that we can work together on, whether it's protecting DACA youth, for example. I'm for legislation that fixes our immigration system, a comprehensive immigration policy, which makes it easier for individuals who want to come here to work and to support their families back home and maybe even travel back home themselves. We should enable that because our economy, our society also needs that here in the United States of America. With that being said, obviously I'm going to call out President Biden when he needs to be called out. So not only the Uyghur policy, but the policy against the unborn, the direct attack against the preborn in this country, it's just inexcusable. And as a Catholic, this is a non-negotiable issue. So even on the immigration issue, we might have prudential differences on how to best approach the immigration issue as Catholics. We don't differ on the fact that each immigrant is made in the image and likeness of God and is deserving of some fundamental respect. And there's some fundamental Catholic tenets which supports individuals' rights to immigrate to a country as they're seeking a better life. However, we can debate whether or not there should be a border wall. We can debate whether or not individuals who have been living here for a certain amount of time, who don't have a criminal record, should they have a pathway to citizenship? We could prudentially have differences on that and still be in line with our Catholic faith. However, when it comes to the pro-life issue, you cannot in any way, shape, or form support the killing of innocent children in the womb. So that is why Archbishop Naumann, in a recent Catholic World Report interview, said that the president, quote, "The president should stop defining himself as a devout Catholic and acknowledge that his view on abortion is contrary to Catholic moral teaching." Again, President Biden is someone who supports abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy, has now reversed the Mexico City policy, meaning billions of our taxpayer dollars are going to pay for abortions overseas. And he's trying to do that here at home with the removal of the Hyde Amendment as well. And so thank you, Archbishop Naumann, for speaking courageously. We need imagine if every one of our bishops came out and said, you know what, President Biden, you can no longer call yourself devout Catholic. You are not the leader of the Catholic Church in this country. We are. And if our bishops stood up and they acted like the leaders of the country, that's exactly what would happen. Maybe Catholics would have to rethink their own positions on this issue, this foundational issue. But thank you, Archbishop Naumann, for leading the way here. So incredibly important. All right, third story of the week that caught my attention. A city public school principal is asking parents, I believe this is in New York City, the East Side Community School in Manhattan, is asking parents to reflect on their whiteness, passing out literature that extols white traitors who dismantle institutions. Educational officials confirmed to the New York Post this past Tuesday. So they put our woke identities on this 8 different identity spectrum, the 8 white identities. Are you a white supremacist? I mean, and the curriculum writer, Barner Hesse, said there's a regime of whiteness and there are action-oriented white identities. Look, folks, there are different people who have fought for equal justice in this country when it comes to race. And it's important that we fight for equal justice, that everyone has equal opportunity and access to the American dream. We're not guaranteeing equal outcomes because not everybody works the same, okay? Not everybody plays by the rules. So we can't guarantee equal outcomes. And often from the progressive left on this issue, they want everybody to be equal outcomes. And you can't have that. You can have equal opportunity. That's what we should be working for. So you had people like Martin Luther King Jr. who fought for those equal rights. But Martin Luther King Jr. over and over again, he even said himself, he said, we're not about black power because black power is just as dangerous as white power. We're about the content of someone's character, like who they are on the inside. He knew 1 Samuel 16:7, where it said that God looks on the person's heart, not on their outward appearance. And King had a dream where, one day every black boy and every black girl, they would play with white boys and white girls, okay? But this ideology that is being advanced, it just wants to blame one group of people for every societal ill. And a lot of the language that you hear, whether it's white privilege, whether it's white fragility, whether it's institutional racism, this comes from a different part of the civil rights movement, Malcolm X and some other characters that were trying to pit whites against blacks, trying to make it all about being against each other to a certain extent. I mean, just think of the term institutional racism, okay? In a lot of these cities, for example, where they're complaining about institutional racism, there is a black individual who's a head of the chief police. There's a black mayor. So are they responsible for the institutional racism? I was just thinking of the Freddie Gray case out of Baltimore. A lot of people came up and said, it's the institutional racism. There was an African-American mayor. There was an African-American police chief. Are they responsible for that institutional racism? So this term institutional racism or white privilege, it just creates this boogeyman, right? That it's not about changing individuals' hearts and minds. It's about just blaming issues all on one group of people. That's the easy way out. And we have to work harder to find racial equality and justice in this country. And it's not going to be just throwing around these buzzwords and making people apologize for being white or making them identify where do you fall on the spectrum of your whiteness. Look, I acknowledge I'm very white, but I love all people. I love all my black friends. I love all my white friends. I love all my female friends. But it just doesn't advance the conversation when we just throw out these terms. And you notice it often comes from like the progressive left. So if you don't think that, for example, two men should be married under the law, well, immediately you're a homophobe. Okay. Well, do you know my life? Do you know my friends? Do you know how I treat people in my life? But immediately you're just labeled a bigot if you say something. Or if you think defund the police is actually bad, then you're immediately called a racist. We're going to get to that in just a minute because some of these ideas that are being pushed by the progressive left, seeking equal justice under the law, they're dangerous. And that's why I'm speaking out against them. It's not because a certain group is proposing them. I'm just against them because they're bad policies. Sorry, I'm getting fired up again. Calm down. Here we go. Number fourth story here. In a recent interview with MIT Technology Review, Microsoft founder, here we go, he's back at it. Not only does he want to send smoke into the atmosphere to block the sun, but get this. One suggestion that Gates proposed for, reducing carbon emissions is for the wealthy and developed nations to move entirely to synthetic beef in efforts to reduce the carbon emissions from livestock. Mr. Gates, no, I like my hamburgers. Stay away from them. Let's move on. Number 5, what's happening down in Texas? Now, first and foremost, our heart goes out to everyone who's suffering in Texas. That's incredibly difficult to be without electricity, to be without water. We have friends in Kentucky. Same thing happened with them, with their electricity was out, so they went to a friend's house and everything. That's not easy, especially in the middle of the coldness, and especially if you're living in a part of the country where you're not used to the cold. So please pray for the people in Texas. Help out with Catholic charities, whatever organizations are down there helping. But a few different things I want to point out about the story. Number 1, why does every crisis immediately have to become political? Why does AOC, for example, jump on immediately and say, this is why we need the Green New Deal because people are without power in Texas? It's like, can we just take a week or two to find ways to help people before we just immediately make this something political? It's like every crisis that ever happens, it's like, how do we take advantage of this politically? Why don't we just have a little compassion, suffer with people a little bit, and find ways to actually practically help them? Okay. Number 2 now, a few things I want to address about this as well, because it's all over the news. So CNN, instead of, spending a couple weeks on Governor Cuomo there in New York and how he literally helped lead to the death of thousands of patients in nursing homes because he allowed COVID-19 positive people into those nursing homes, instead of covering that, there's little side stories there. What they want to cover is Senator Ted Cruz from Texas going to Cancun during this crisis. Now, Senator Cruz shouldn't have done that. And his thoughts were, well, I was just being a good dad. My daughters wanted to go down there and so on and so forth. Look, I want to be a good dad and everything too, but and there's also this part too where as a senator, he has different responsibilities than the governor. He's not necessarily rallying troops like a governor needs to from a real practical level. With that being said, Senator Cruz, if your state that you represent is hurting, you need to be there and you need to be on the ground. So there's just really no excuse for that. And I get it, that your family wants you to be with them. Well, your daughters don't have to go to Cancun for a vacation, for goodness sake, okay? They can be in Texas too. You can be with your family. But I'm not going to get into too much telling people what they should do with their families. What I do want to focus on was Congressman Dan Crenshaw, who had a pretty solid reasoning for this is what's going on. Okay, so 3 things. 1, the frozen wind turbines. So speaking of, going green, in West Texas, there's all these wind turbines. Well, they froze. So going green doesn't always necessarily work. Number 2, even the nuclear power, though, their nuclear power units in Texas, they have 4, all their sensors froze, so they had to shut down as well. Number 3, they had a low supply of natural gas. A lot of their, not that they ran out of it, but they ran out of the ability to get the natural gas there because, again, the pipelines in Texas froze. So every avenue of power that we think about in this country, whether it's green, whether it's nuclear, or whether it's coal and gas, look, they all froze. It's nobody's fault. It's just a reality of like people in Texas aren't used to those freezing temperatures. So stop the blame game on, everybody and trying to push a Green New Deal because of what's going on. All right, moving along. I'm running out of time here. Sorry. Okay, number 6. We've talked a little bit about this on the show and why some of the issues that Congress is trying to push and the executive orders that President Biden has pushed forward are dangerous, such as the transgender order, allowing biological males into female sports. Right now, Congress is Nancy Pelosi is looking to push forward the Equality Act. Folks, please call your congressman, call your congresswoman, let them know the Equality Act is dangerous and you don't want it pushed forward. I mean, basically, it codifies all those things that we've said is dangerous as far as allowing biological males into women's battered shelters, homeless shelters, allowing them into women's sports. It also it degrades some of the advances we've made for women in the civil rights movement. For example, the Small Business Administration Office of the Women's Business Ownership, whose mission is to enable and empower women entrepreneurs through advocacy, outreach, education, and support, would have to give biological men who identify as women access to its programs. So a federal government program meant directly to help women start their own businesses and everything would now have to also recognize biological males and enable them into the program. Okay? Doesn't make sense. It's also going to affect and erode parental rights. There was a case out of Cincinnati just a couple years ago where there was a teenager who wanted hormone treatment to transition. Mind you, you know who's becoming the leader in hormonal treatment among teenagers right now? Who's giving these dangerous hormonal unproven treatments to teenagers. You guessed it. Planned Parenthood has stepped in to fill the gap to give our teenagers dangerous hormonal treatments to help them transition. More on that in another show. Nonetheless, these types of bills and legislation like the Equality Act would erode parental rights. There was already a case in Cincinnati where a teenager was removed from the parents' home because the parents, how dare they, refused to give their teenage daughter hormonal treatment. Okay, I said, no, we love you and we're going to walk with you with what you're struggling with, but we don't think you should be pumping your body with hormones. But look, if this Equality Act gets passed, I mean, literally, think about it. If you got a teenager in home, I mean, are they going to be pulled out by the federal government because you refuse to give them hormonal treatment? You refuse to give your daughter testosterone? I mean, is that the country that we want to live in? And going back to a practical example of how this is dangerous. So if this is in every sport, okay, this is also in the MMA, okay? So in the MMA, which is a very dangerous, it's a bloody sport, they allowed a biological male who is transitioning into being a female into the ring with a female fighter, okay? What happened? Well, he broke the female fighter's skull, okay? And this is being praised on some LGBT-focused websites, calling this fighter the bravest athlete in history. Let's move on. Number 7. This is just too rich. Let's go back to these policies that are dangerous. Now, look, I'm not opposing policies because they come from Black Lives Matter. If Black Lives Matter has a good policy that they're proposing, I'll be the first to support it. But one of the policies that they were espousing and still espousing is the Defund the Police movement. So where George Floyd was tragically killed, they espoused this, and that's what Minneapolis, Minnesota did. They defunded their police department. Well, what happened? Crime increased exponentially. Police officers who were maligned, good police officers, quit their jobs. So what is the Minneapolis City doing now? They are spending $6.4 million on a recruiting campaign for police officers. So you defund the police, you berate the police as these evil, awful people. 200 police officers quit. And what do? You're not even paying police officers. You have to pay $6.4 million just to recruit them onto the force. Meanwhile, crime, homicides through the roof in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Folks, these policies are dangerous. These ideas are dangerous. That's why we're speaking out against them. Number 8, South Carolina bill bans abortions once an unborn baby's heartbeat is detectable, will become law. Praise the Lord. Some good news to report. It makes sense that when a baby's heart is beating, we should protect it. You know, it also makes sense. We should protect babies right from the moment of conception. When they are made, they become a unique creation with the chromosomes from the dad and the chromosomes from their mother. It will combine a unique combination that the world has never seen before and never will ever again. Maybe that's where we should protect a baby. But positive step. I celebrate it. Heartbeat bill passes in South Carolina. Praise the Lord. Number 9. Am I going too long, Colleen? I don't know. I'm having fun. Number 9. Nancy Pelosi. Speaking of protecting the unborn, you know how many times that she has blocked legislation in the Congress that would simply protect unborn babies who survived abortions once they're out of the womb. If they survive that abortion, all people on the Republican side wanted to say was that these babies should be given then life-saving treatment. They should not be left on the operating room table left to die. A pretty simple, basic concept that a baby born should be allowed and given medical treatment. But Nancy Pelosi has blocked this legislation, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, 80 times in Congress. This is another woman who calls herself a devout Catholic. You're not Catholic if you're not for protecting these little children. All right, lastly, number 10, David Vatures from Annunciation Radio gave an amazing talk at the Catholic Business Network. And I just wanted to recap what he said because it gave me hope because, you know, reading these stories, my goodness, there's a lot of mess going on in the country right now. And it seems like there's a lot of darkness. And it's like, what do we do as Catholics? What do we do as Catholic citizens? Where does our hope come from? Well, our hope comes from the Lord. 3 stories he pointed out. Number 1, from Noah. Noah was given not just a pair of every animal during the flood, but he was given 7 pairs of every clean animal to take onto the boat, okay? Why was he given that? For food and for sacrifice. Even amidst the great flood, God was providing Noah with what he needed. And we're approaching this time in human history in our country where there is a great flood, if you will, of bad things going on. But trust and believe that God will give you the provision you need to get through it. Number 2, Moses and the Egyptians. You know, they escape Egypt. They find themselves at the Red Sea between the Egyptian army and the Red Sea, and they're stuck. They got nowhere to go, and they start complaining against Moses. Moses, did you bring us out here because there wasn't enough graves in Egypt that you wanted us to die here in the desert? Moses raises his hand all night with his staff, and God parts a way through the waters. The very thing that would seemingly be their death, God parts a way. Not only that, then he destroys the Egyptian army with those same waters. So when you find yourself at a great abyss, a great flood again of water, and you feel like, I don't know how we're going to get through, trust that is the very water that the Lord will use for your redemption and your salvation. It may seem like you're drowning in that water, but no, God is going to work through that water that you seem like you're drowning in, and he's going to bring about your salvation and redemption through it, just like he did the Israelites. Lastly, you know, the apostles on Good Friday. Folks, God always has a plan. The apostles on Good Friday, they're looking at the cross, right? St. John was there with Mother Mary, and they're looking at their Savior, and Jesus is bleeding to death. He's going to die of shock on the cross. But God had a plan. God had a plan. He took the worst thing that happened in human history, the death of his son, Jesus, who he loved so dearly on the cross, and he turned it into the resurrection and our hope for eternal life. My brothers and sisters in the Lord, things may seem dark, but it's always the darkest before the dawn. Continue to hope, continue to believe, continue to look up to God, our Father, our Daddy, because our Dad always has a plan and he will bring us through. We'll see you next week on The Catholic Citizen.
This show and all media on Awaken Catholic is made possible by the Awaken Nation and the Hallow app. The Awaken Nation is a community of people like you who support all things Awaken for as cheap as a cup of coffee a week and get access to exclusive content. Learn more by visiting awakencatholic.org/donate. Hallow is the only audio-guided Catholic prayer app focused on contemplative prayer and traditional Catholic meditation such as Lectio Divina, Daily Examen, and the Rosary. We here at Awaken all use Hallow every day and love it. To learn more or give it a try, visit hallow.app/awaken.